A lot of people think that travel is really expensive, and I totally understand that, but actually from my experience, I found that living in the United States is much more expensive than full-time travel as a digital nomad. So what do I mean by that? Well, before we dive into why traveling full-time and living as a digital nomad is actually less expensive, let's look a little bit at why the USA is so expensive. First, of course, you have to consider your accommodation. Now, in the United States, most people are either going to be renting or they're going to be buying a home. Now, either way, home prices in the United States are currently skyrocketing, so it's becoming more and more expensive to actually become a homeowner. But outside of that, rent also just keeps going up and up and up. In fact, there are plenty of studies out there that show that the average American working on a full-time minimum wage cannot afford a two-bedroom apartment anywhere in the country. So for me, as a single parent with a young daughter, if I want to have a two-bedroom place and I'm working in the United States, and if I'm stuck on that minimum wage, it's just not going to be possible to actually live in the United States and save money. It's very expensive to pay for housing there. But let's say you have a job that actually pays you kind of decently, better than minimum wage. You still have to have a car in the United States as well, because there are so few places where public transportation is even actually good enough to use every day. Now, maybe in the big cities, you might be able to use the trains and the buses and they run efficiently for you, but compared to other places in the world, our infrastructure for that kind of stuff really sucks. Now, that's even more true if you come from a small town like I do, where there's only one bus service. You have to call ahead for it. They might take up to an hour to even come pick you up, and then if you need to go to the grocery store, you'd have to do it again and wait for them. Half your groceries are gonna melt. It's just not feasible to actually use public transportation in the United States in a serious way. So that leaves a lot of us having to have a car. Now that means you either have to have the money up front to buy one, or you have to have a car payment every month. Now either way, having a car payment every month, that's setting you back significantly, or having to even just buy a car, that takes away a lot of your capital. Let's assume you do have the capital to buy a car, you've got one, but now you still have to pay insurance every month, you still have to pay for your oil changes, you still have maintenance and repairs and upkeep. It becomes a huge hassle, and it's quite a significant financial drain living in the United States. Now, as an American, you also have to deal with their healthcare system, and if you're an American, you already know that you pay more for healthcare than anywhere else, but you might not be quite aware as how cheap it is in other countries, and we'll dive a little bit more into that later in this video. For example, as a single dad, I'm looking at healthcare for me and my daughter every month, and the plans that I was looking at, the least expensive ones are running at least $250 a month, and that includes a $13,000 deductible every year. So you're looking at what, $15,000, $16,000 a year on healthcare. That's just unreasonable. Moreover, if you're like me, you like to go out to restaurants or you like to order in food, things like that. Again, in the United States, the prices are just way overinflated. The food in the United States is expensive, one, but then you also have to consider the drinks that come with it, two, and then you have to consider that in the United States, we actually tip people about 20%, so then that adds up on top as well. The restaurants in the United States, because of this, are just way too expensive. And I'm talking even the basic restaurants like Applebee's are way too expensive. And if you start looking at places like fast food restaurants, you can compare the prices that you pay there to really nice restaurants that you might pay down here where I am in Mexico right now. And we all have one of these, don't we? We all gotta have a cell phone bill. Now in the United States, minimum you're looking at what, $50 a month, $60 a month? I know a lot of people who are paying $100 or more a month for their cell phone bills. That's just not going to happen in other countries. It's a ridiculous cost what we pay in the US. And what if you like to entertain yourself by going out and doing things? Well, again, that's another thing in the US that is just really expensive. I'm talking going out and watching sports or going to a club or anything like that. You can easily spend $100 to $200 a day on entertainment. It's outrageous compared to what we pay in other countries. Now let's compare all those really high prices to what you might pay in another country for similar things. And let me preface this by saying probably the best way to save money while traveling full-time is to do what I call slow travel. So you might see a lot of other YouTubers who are out there going to a new city every week, going to a new country every month, bouncing around, checking out all kinds of new places. That can really add up because you have to consider the flights all the time, the buses, the taxis, all the moving around, the changing of accommodations, etc. It can really add up really quick if you're traveling like that. Now, for you Americans who might fly down to Cancun, where I am, you might come and stay for a week in like an all-inclusive resort and then fly back home. Now, that's your idea of travel. That is going to be expensive because you're buying a flight there, you're buying a flight back, you're paying an outrageous price for 1 week in a hotel, and all of that can really add up, especially if you're going to try and do that every single week. So no wonder you think travel is expensive. Now again, that's not what I want you to do. I want you to slow travel. So what I'm talking about is flying into a country, staying there for as long as possible. Down in here in Mexico, you can easily just come in for 6 months. You don't have to fly out every single week. And in those 6 months, you could just stay in one apartment, maybe 2 or 3 if you want to check out a couple different cities. But either way, if you're spending at least a month in one spot, you can get a much lower rate on your accommodations. If you're staying longer, again, lower rates the longer you stay. So using slow travel as a point to save money is one of my key points. And I'm also not buying my flight tickets during the times that are most heavily used. So again, if you're in the USA, you're coming down to Cancun for your all-inclusive resort, it's probably during a vacation time, and during vacation time, even flights themselves are more booked up, so the prices are jacked up. It's a lot better to fly during the shoulder seasons like I have. I just came down to Mexico in August. Most people wouldn't do that because Mexico in August gets well into the 90s and it's humid, and most people don't want to come down to Cancun because there's hurricanes and things like that. So this is a great time to get flights down here. My daughter and I just flew down here. We had the 2 big front seats on our flight, and it only cost us $400 to get down here. Now, once we got down here, one of the things that right away I could tell you about is that the restaurants and the food are much less expensive. Now, if I go to the grocery store, I can spend $35 and it's gonna last me for like a week's worth of food. Never gonna happen like that in the United States. I'm spending more like $100 a week on groceries there. But moreover, I do like to use restaurants or order in food, things like that, because I don't always wanna have to cook. I have 2 people I'm cooking for, myself and my daughter, and so restaurants really help out. And down here in Mexico, for example, where honestly it's not even that cheap compared to other countries, restaurants here are still much better priced. So I ordered Pizza Hut the other day, for example, and it came out to $10 for a large pizza, a 3-liter of soda, and some breadsticks, and that was delivered for $10. Compare that to the United States, that same exact meal is going to be about $20. So even the major restaurants here that you can find in the United States, they've cut their prices about in half down here in Mexico. Now, if you're going to go to the actual like local restaurants and things like that, prices are going to drop even more. Now, where I was living previously, I remember one of my favorite restaurants that I would go to was a little Mexican place, and they served fantastic food, and it was usually come out to about $3 for a meal, maybe $4 tops. It was a really nice place to eat, and you can find places like that all over in Mexico. And you know, down here, still got to use the cell phone, still got to have data and calling abilities, but here it's going to cost me $20 a month to keep this loaded up. You know, maybe 30 or 40 if I use all my gigs and I just need to refill it, something like that. But even then, the most expensive months for down here in Mexico using my phone are cheaper than the cheapest months up in the United States. Now, when it comes to entertainment, if you're in a place like Cancun right here, like yes, okay, the entertainment's still going to be really expensive. If you want to go to, say, like a water park or something, it's going to be roughly equivalently priced. If you're going to go to the cenotes down here, those aren't going to be inexpensive either. So in a country like this, there's actually a lot of ways to find a lot of free entertainment. You know, the weather's just a lot better down here. There are tons of beaches. Now, I'm from Michigan. There are beaches there, but they're only really usable about 3 months out of the year. If you're lucky enough to grow up in Southern California, maybe, you know, moving to Mexico is not going to be a big difference for you in terms of how often you can go to the beach and be outside and enjoy yourself. But I know that from being from Michigan, if you want to entertain yourself, especially during the winter, you have to go use indoor places. You got to be paying for it. But when you come down here in Mexico during the winter time, I could just spend all my time outside. We can just go sit at the pool. We can go down to the beach. There are lots of things we can do that are absolutely free. So it cuts back on a lot of those costs for entertainment. So I want you to get rid of that mindset that traveling full-time is expensive or that traveling is expensive at all. It's only expensive if you're traveling like an American, but if you're an American who knows how to travel, then it's not going to cost you much at all.